The city looked different at night, beautiful yet lonely. From the outside, the 38-story Malik Global Headquarters looked like a monument of success. Glass walls reflecting neon colors, a corporate crown glowing against the sky. Thousands worked here during the day, but now the building was nearly silent. Except for one man. Amir, 43 years old, in a faded blue janitorial uniform, was pushing his cleaning cart down the long corridor of the 29th floor. His steps echoed softly against the polished tiles, and the humming sound of fluorescent lights filled the hallway like a mechanical lullaby. It was 1:07 a.m. Amir checked his watch out of habit, not because he was late. He was never late. He could not afford to be. People like him lived one step away from disaster. One mistake, one complaint, one bad day could take away everything. He ran the mop across the floor with practiced movement, the kind that comes from years of repetition. His back ached, his shoulders were stiff, but he kept working without a sigh. He had no choice. Tonight, like every night, he wasn't cleaning floors. He was protecting a life. His 8-year-old daughter, Alina, was at home, sleeping with a nebulizer near her pillow. Severe asthma, expensive medicines, costly checkups, school fees, rent. Amir's whole life was a balance sheet that never added up. He earned too little. He spent too much. And still, he never complained, because he loved that little girl more than he loved breathing itself. But life had not always crushed him. Years ago, Amir was a top engineering student. Bright, hardworking, full of dreams. He was the boy professors pointed out and told the class. One day, he will build great things. But life doesn't ask for permission before changing direction. His mother fell sick. Medical bills piled up. Scholarships weren't enough. Career had to wait. Survival couldn't. And somehow, the future that once looked limitless shrank into a mop, a bucket, and a night shift. He got divorced. Responsibilities doubled. Dreams became luxury. Yet still, he moved forward. But tonight, he didn't know that life was about to test him harder than ever before. The elevator dings. Amir paused when he heard the elevator arrive. At this hour, no one should be working. Maybe security? Maybe a junior executive finishing overtime? But the doors opened, and in stepped arrogance in a suit. Zion Malik, the 38-year-old CEO of the company, walked out as if the entire building bowed to him. Expensive watch, sharp Italian suit, cold eyes. He was the kind of man whose footsteps carried authority and ego in equal measure. During the day, people almost lowered their voices around him, as if afraid their existence might disturb his air. Amir instinctively stepped aside and leaned the mop against the wall. Zion didn't greet him, didn't nod, didn't see him as a person. To him, Amir was part of the building like the wall or the floor, useful but invisible. The CEO stopped and looked down with mild irritation. "Is this floor wet?" he said sharply. "I could have slipped. Do you people even think?" Amir instantly straightened. His voice was low, respectful, and tired. "Sir, I'm very sorry. I tried to keep it on the side. If you give me 1 minute." Zion raised a hand. He didn't want explanations. "That's the problem," the CEO said coldly. "People like you work hard but never use your heads. That's why you mop floors, and I run the company." Amir's heart tightened. He swallowed down the insult like medicine without water. Not because he was weak. Because arguing with the powerful was expensive, and he couldn't afford the price. A security guard in the lobby had heard everything, but he kept his eyes on the desk.
Why?
Because hierarchy is frightening. Because people need their jobs. Because speaking truth takes courage, and silence pays rent. Amir said quietly, "My apologies, sir." But in his heart, a tiny bruise formed. One of many. The CEO's world. Zion dropped his leather bag on the glass reception table, looking annoyed. "I need the main conference room cleaned and prepped in 5 minutes," he ordered. "Midnight investor meeting. And make sure the coffee is hot. I don't tolerate mistakes." Amir nodded and rushed to work without a word. In 5 minutes, the conference table was polished. Chairs were aligned perfectly. Projector and laptop ports were checked. The AC temperature was corrected. Water glasses were set. Notepads and pens were arranged. No one ever saw this effort. But everything always had to be perfect, even if the person maintaining perfection never got recognized. That was Amir's life. His work was visible, he was not. Coffee turns into a crime. Amir rushed to the break room, made a fresh pot of coffee, and brought a mug to Zion. The CEO took a sip. He frowned immediately. Cold. Amir blinked. The machine's heating light was blinking red. It had tripped. Before he could explain, Zion spoke like a judge delivering a sentence. Is this your professional standard? Incompetence. Amir tried to explain calmly. Sir, the machine has a heating issue. If you allow me. But Zion cut him off again. Stop making excuses. Fix it. Or I'll fix your position in this company. Amir's throat went dry. Not because of fear, but because of Alina. If he lost this job, what would happen to her? He bowed his head and said, Yes, sir. People don't remain silent because they lack courage. They remain silent because they carry responsibilities heavier than pride. A lonely building. By 2 a.m., the building had fallen quiet again. Only the distant hum of ventilation ducts, the rolling wheels of a cleaning cart, the tapping of expensive shoes on marble, kept the night alive. Amir mopped quietly, but his mind wasn't here. He was thinking of the small girl sleeping alone at home, her breathing always just slightly too loud, slightly too shallow. But just then, his phone buzzed. He froze. Phones were not allowed during shift, especially not while the CEO was present. But the message was from Alina. He slipped into a corner and played the voice note. Her small, strained voice came through. Abu, my breath hurts, medicine is finished, please come home. Amir felt his chest tighten painfully. His eyes burned, but he couldn't cry. He couldn't shout. He couldn't even call her back properly. He whispered, I'm coming, my love. But he wasn't coming. He couldn't. If he walked out now, Zion would issue a complaint. Complaint, official report. Report, termination. Termination, medicine stops. Treatment stops, school stops. No father can breathe when he hears his child struggling too. But Amir had to choose between being there for 1 minute or providing for her future. Sometimes love is choosing the pain that keeps your child safe. The final insult. When Amir returned to the conference room, picking up a few paper scraps from the floor, Zion spoke loud enough to echo. You janitors should understand your worth. This company is beyond your level. Stick to mopping floors. Everyone in the room heard it. Amir didn't reply. His silence wasn't defeat. It was survival. He lifted the trash bag, pressed the cart handle, and walked away. Because poor people can't afford loud reactions. They just carry their wounds quietly. What no one knows. Zion saw only a janitor. He didn't know. Amir once topped in engineering. He had designed the company's server layout during internship. He was smarter than half the engineers working here. He had once dreamed of being a chief systems architect. But life had rerouted him. Responsibilities had crushed Dre. The night grew deeper, but Malik Global Headquarters felt heavier than usual. Amir continued his shift quietly, pretending that nothing had affected him. Neither the CEO's insults, nor Alina's scared voice trembling through the phone. He cleaned the windows, dusted the wall frames, and emptied office bins with robotic precision. On the surface, he looked calm. Inside, he was fighting storms no one could see. Because people rarely notice the battles of someone who doesn't scream. The company that never slept. Malik Global was one of the fastest-growing tech corporations in the country. Daytime, it was a battlefield of suits, laptops, ideas, deadlines, competition, and ambition. But at night, it became something else entirely. The silence exposed truths. Late-night calls didn't always mean dedication. Sometimes they meant fear. Perfection wasn't a work ethic, it was a survival tactic. And the higher someone rose, the lonelier their world became. Even Zion Malik, the feared young CEO, was in the building alone. He was seated at the head of the glass conference table, 3 digital screens glowing in front of him, charts and figures running like armies across the displays. He tapped his pen against the marble surface, jaw locked, shoulders tense. He looked powerful, but power often hides pressure. Investors wanted faster results. Competitors were closing in. Stock expectations were rising. Even a man at the top could feel like he was hanging from a rope. No one saw Zion's struggle. Unlike Amir, who had nothing to hide, Zion had everything to protect. Legacy, company reputation, his father's vision, his ego. But the greatest irony was that the janitor being ignored on the other side of the glass hall could save the company better than half the executives. Fate had placed them together in the same battle, but on opposite sides of a social staircase. Two men, same building, different wars. Amir finished vacuuming the corridor outside the meeting room and leaned the machine carefully against the wall. His back hurt. Years of bending had left an invisible weight in his spine, but he didn't stop. He never did. He took a slow breath and continued his cleaning, floor by floor. He moved quietly past glass cubicles filled with Team Achievement trophies, Employee of the Month pictures, inspirational quotes framed on walls. He smiled bitterly at one quote. Hard work always pays off. He whispered under his breath. Not for everyone. But he continued walking. He never let bitterness become his identity. Because pain makes some people better and breaks others. Amir belonged to the first category, the voice he couldn't ignore. He reached a corridor window and finally allowed himself a glimpse of the city. Car lights, blinking billboards, skyscrapers, everything looked peaceful from up here. He pulled out his phone again. One new message. Alina had texted. Abu, are you coming soon? His heart cracked a little more. He typed. Almost my angel. Try to sleep. He didn't send voice notes. She might hear the strain in his voice. Fathers hide their pain even from their children. Especially from their children. Amir stood still for a few seconds, staring out of the window, whispering a prayer under his breath. He wished he could be there to hold her hand, check her breathing, give her medicine. But life forced him to choose between being a good father and being a living income. He hated the choice. But he kept standing, the hidden backbone of the building. When he returned to the server floor, a restricted area most employees never cared about, an old memory washed over him. These server racks. These ventilation ducts. These backup power systems. He knew them intimately, because he had designed them during his engineering internship 6 years ago. No one in the company remembered that. Those were just files in storage. His name was on the technical blueprint, but who cared? When the contract ended, he had taken the night shift as a janitor because he needed money immediately. He had told himself, it's temporary, just until things get better. But time moved. Life didn't. And he remained here, mopping the walls of the same system he once built. He walked between the rows of servers, placed a hand on one black metallic casing, and closed his eyes. These machines are safer than lives, he said softly. They have backups. People don't. He turned away. But fate was preparing something no one expected. Back in the conference room. Inside the meeting room, Zion was pacing back and forth. His Bluetooth earpiece blinked blue as he argued with someone in a clipped tone. I don't care about excuses. If the security update fails, we lose investors. Amir quietly stepped in through the side door, emptying trash bins without making a sound. He didn't want to disturb. But Zion wasn't the type to ignore anything happening in his line of sight. He shot a sharp look at Amir and spoke into his mic. 1 minute. Then he pulled the earpiece out and snapped. Do you have to clean right now? Amir paused. Yes, sir. Shift schedule requires. Zion cut him off, voice heavy with stress. I'm in the middle of a critical meeting worth millions. Your noise is distracting. Amir's hands tightened on the trash bag. He wanted to say, Sir, I'm also in the middle of a child's medical crisis worth more than millions to me. But life had trained him not to say his truth. He only nodded again and walked backward out of the room, like a shadow disappearing quietly. 2 people watching him. Zion went back to his call. But someone had seen the exchange. In the corner of the room sat Salmar, a new intern, barely 22. He had been observing silently, not interfering, just watching. He didn't understand corporate hierarchy completely, but he did understand one thing. There was no need to talk to someone like that. When Amir left, Samar whispered, "Sir, he was just doing his job." Zion raised a brow. "You're new. Let me teach you something. This company runs on excellence, not emotions." Samar didn't argue, but he looked away with clear discomfort. People forget. Some of the greatest revolutions start in the minds of silent witnesses. Back to work. Amir kept moving through the floors. While most employees never noticed who did it, the system depended on him more than they would ever know. Without janitors, the building would collapse into chaos in 72 hours. But recognition is a luxury given only to visible work. Invisible effort rarely gets applause. Cracks in the night. As Amir crossed the 27th floor hallway, he heard a faint clicking sound, something electrical struggling. He paused, listening carefully. Then he heard it again. Click, click, click. He followed the noise to the server floor once more. A faint red light blinked on one of the panels labeled Fire Suppression, Temp Sensor Fault. Amir frowned. That warning should not be on. Not here. Not ever. He leaned closer. Something was wrong with the cooling system. If server heat rose unchecked, systems could melt. Backup generators would overload. And the entire floor could catch fire. He straightened, alert. This wasn't a janitor's problem, but it would become everyone's problem soon. He opened the maintenance hatch and checked. The cooling pipe was vibrating lightly. The temperature sensor wasn't responding. Amir's heartbeat quickened. He had seen something like this only once before, 3 years ago, during a corporate training simulation. If the cooling system failed and heat built up, a spark inside the server racks could trigger a fire powerful enough to shut down the entire company. Section 3. The night everything went wrong. 1,200 words. The office was silent, too silent. Most employees had gone home, leaving the tall glass building glowing faintly in the city skyline. Only 2 people remained inside, Jonathan Carter, the overlooked janitor, and a security guard half asleep in his booth with headphones on. It was nearly midnight when Jonathan, tired but disciplined, pushed his mop bucket across the hallway. His eyes were burning, his back ached, and every muscle in his body screamed to go home. But he had a rule: no matter how hard the day was, he would finish the job properly. His daughter depended on him. His promise to her depended on him. His dignity depended on him. He was poor, but he would never be careless. He entered the east wing of the building, where the server room stood behind a heavy access door. The server room was the heart of Sterling Corporation, filled with stacks of humming machines and blinking lights that powered everything the company ran. Inside those machines were contracts, financial reports, business data, and millions of dollars in digital information. If this room died, the entire company would halt within minutes. Jonathan gently leaned his mop against the wall and bent down to gather a few scraps of paper someone had left on the floor. He sighed softly. Some workers treated him like he wasn't even a person. They left trash, spilled coffee, and walked away without a second thought. But he cleaned it anyway. Because his standard wasn't based on how others treated him, it was based on who he was. Just as he stood, something caught his attention. A faint burning smell. At first he ignored it. The office cafeteria oven sometimes leaked fumes when overused. But then he realized this smell was sharper, electrical, metallic. He paused, sniffing the air again, and immediately felt his heartbeat change. Something was wrong. Jonathan stepped toward the server room door and pressed his ear against it. At first, nothing. But then, a soft crackling sound like electricity dancing across wires. That wasn't normal. He pulled out his janitor's keycard and swiped it. The door unlocked with a beep. The moment he pushed it open, he froze. A cable unit deep inside the server tower was sparking. Tiny blue arcs of electricity were jumping out like fireflies. A second later, smoke curled upward from the power panel. Jonathan's stomach dropped. This could cause a fire. No, this could cause an explosion. He looked around. No one else was here. No engineers, no IT staff, not even the CEO who mocked him earlier. It was just him. Him, and a disaster waiting to happen. Jonathan didn't waste a second. He ran to the wall where emergency power controls were mounted. A lock protected the master shutoff switch. Only authorized employees were supposed to access it. But right above it, Jonathan saw a small glass emergency panel with a hammer hanging beside it. Break only in emergency. This was an emergency. He grabbed the hammer and smashed the glass. Alarms clicked alive as red lights began flashing on the control panel. He hit the power disconnect switch with a force he didn't know he had. Every server in the room began powering down. Fans stopped spinning. The low humming noise faded into silence. But that wasn't enough. Smoke was still seeping out. That meant heat was building. If it continued, the servers could still ignite, and if they ignited, fire suppression systems might fail under pressure. He had one choice: trigger the building fire alarms. Even though it would interrupt late-night auto backups. Even though it would alert the entire company. Even though he would probably get blamed. Jonathan sprinted out into the hallway and slammed his hand onto the red pull handle mounted on the wall. Instantly. Police car light warning. Police car light fire emergency. Police car light please evacuate. Salaried employees would panic at such a disaster. The CEO would wake up to a dozen calls. Someone would report Jonathan for overreacting. But Jonathan Carter was not thinking about consequences or himself. He was thinking about the hundreds of people who would walk into this building tomorrow morning and maybe never walk out if the server room caught fire overnight. The entire building came alive with flashing lights. Emergency doors unlocked automatically. Ventilation systems rerouted. Evacuation pathways lit up. Jonathan grabbed a small extinguisher, returned to the server room, and sprayed the sparking panel until the smoke finally began fading. He coughed, covering his mouth, squinting through the haze. When the last spark died, he dropped to one knee, breathing heavily, exhaustion finally catching up. It was over. The building was safe. He saved it. But at that exact moment, footsteps thundered behind him. Jonathan turned. And standing in the doorway was the one man he didn't want to see. CEO Richard Hayes. He was fully dressed in a tailored suit, despite the late hour. Perhaps he had been on a phone call or meeting from home when the alarm triggered. His bodyguards and two senior managers were at his sides. Hayes stared at Jonathan with icy eyes. "What?" He spoke slowly. "Have you done this time?" Jonathan blinked, still disoriented from the smoke. I stopped a fire," he tried to explain. "The servers were overheating. I had to shut." Hayes cut him off with a raised hand. "Do you realize," he said, voice venomous, "that our entire backup system was running tonight? You just interrupted millions of dollars in automated transfers." Jonathan swallowed. "But if I hadn't acted..." Hayes took a step closer. "Enough. You pulled the building alarm without authorization. You shut down servers without approval. Do you even understand what you've done?" Jonathan could hardly believe it. Was this man serious? He had just saved the company, and yet he was being scolded like a disobedient child. One of the managers stepped forward. "Sir," he said to the CEO, "the smoke sensors didn't go off. The alarm was triggered manually." Hayes narrowed his eyes. "So this," he said, glaring directly at Jonathan, "is his fault." Jonathan clenched his fists, not in anger, but in heartbreak. He had given everything he had, and still he was invisible. Still he was worthless to them. Still he was just a janitor. He could have walked away. He could have responded sharply. But instead, he said quietly, "I only did what was necessary." Hayes laughed. A cold laugh drenched in arrogance. "No. You did what was reckless." Then he issued the words that hit Jonathan harder than any insult before. "You are suspended until further notice." Jonathan froze. He felt every drop of blood drain from his face. Suspended? For saving the company? He stared at the CEO with hollow eyes, but Hayes had already turned around and walked away, completely uninterested in explanations. Jonathan looked at the dark hallway, flashing alarm lights, and the smoke curling behind him, and he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Defeat. For the first time in a long time, Jonathan Carter wondered. Maybe doing the right thing didn't matter anymore. Maybe integrity didn't pay. Maybe he should have just stayed silent and walked away. But what Jonathan didn't know was that everything he had done had been recorded. Every decision, every action, every sacrifice. And by morning, the truth would explode louder than any alarm. Morning broke over the city, golden light spilling across the skyscrapers. Yet inside Malik Global Headquarters, the tension of the night still lingered. The fire alarms had long been silenced, the smoke cleared, but the memory of the chaos had left an imprint. Employees trickled into the office, murmuring about the mysterious emergency that had halted operations. Some were angry, others were confused, and a few, curious, tried to piece together what had happened in the dead of night. Meanwhile, in the CEO's glass-walled office, Zayn Malik paced back and forth. He was furious, not just at the disruption, but at the audacity of the janitor who had apparently triggered it all. He had sent security cameras footage to IT for review. He was determined to know who had messed up his company. When the footage arrived, Zayn's face went pale. He leaned closer to the monitor, adjusting the zoom. There he was, Jonathan Carter, moving swiftly, decisively, shutting down the main power switch, spraying the sparking panel, and pulling the fire alarm. Each action precise, intentional, heroic. Zayn's fingers trembled slightly over the mouse. He replayed the sequence again. 1, 2, 3 times. And then the truth hit him like a punch. This janitor saved the company. Every financial report, every server, every contract, all intact because of Jonathan's quick thinking. A disaster that could have cost millions had been avoided. And yet, he had been punished for it. Zayn sank into his chair. For the first time, he saw Jonathan not as a janitor, not as background noise, but as a human being, a man whose courage, intelligence, and integrity had just saved everything. He called the board immediately. Minutes later, the directors convened for an emergency meeting. They reviewed the CCTV footage, watched Jonathan maneuver through sparks and smoke, and were unanimous. This man is a hero. He cannot be suspended. He deserves recognition, not reprimand. Zayn sat silently as the decision sank in. His pride fought with his conscience. He wanted to argue, to insist it was reckless. But deep down, he knew the truth could not be denied. An assistant knocked and led Jonathan into the office. He entered, exhausted, smoke-stained, but still standing tall. The moment Zayn saw him, the CEO's voice faltered. I owe you an explanation, Zayn began, but Jonathan shook his head gently. I didn't do it for thanks, he said softly. I just did what was right. Zayn swallowed hard. Right, yes. You saved this company. You saved lives. I was wrong. He motioned to the board members, who entered the room and nodded in agreement. The board chairman spoke. Jonathan Carter, effective immediately, you are promoted to Safety and Infrastructure Manager. Your salary will be doubled, and you will have full authority over maintenance operations. Jonathan blinked, stunned. It was more than he expected. Not because of the money or the title, but because finally someone had seen him, not just his job, but him. Zayn took a deep breath. And I apologize. I underestimated you. I judged you without knowing who you truly are. Jonathan nodded, still calm. Thank you. That's all I needed. Outside, employees who had watched the newsfeed of the overnight emergency were cheering. The man everyone had ignored had saved the company, and now, justice had finally been served. It was a lesson no one could forget. Heroism isn't always visible, and integrity often comes quietly, but its impact is undeniable. The office buzzed with life once again, but now the atmosphere had changed. Whispers of the previous night's events spread through the floors. Employees looked at Jonathan with newfound respect. He walked through the halls no longer invisible, no longer just the janitor. Alina's voice rang in his memory, the reason he had endured the night's challenges. That small girl, asleep at home, unaware of the storm her father had faced, had been the silent motivator. He had protected not only his workplace, but the future he promised for her. Zayn Malik, the CEO, now viewed Jonathan differently. He had learned a lesson many CEOs never learn. Titles, suits, and hierarchy mean nothing if courage, intelligence, and integrity are absent. And in Jonathan, all three qualities had shone under the brightest pressure. In the days following, Zayn personally mentored Jonathan, seeking his advice on not just maintenance, but risk management, emergency planning, and employee safety protocols. He invited him to board meetings, valuing his insight in ways no one had expected. Jonathan realized that sometimes respect isn't demanded. It's earned quietly through actions that speak louder than words. Jonathan returned home one evening after his first week in the new role. Alina ran into his arms, her asthma under control, her smile brighter than ever. "Daddy, Daddy, you're a hero," she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. Jonathan laughed softly. "We're heroes together, Alina. You're my inspiration every single day." For the first time in years, he felt the weight lift off his shoulders. Not because the world had changed, but because he had stayed true to himself. And the world eventually had recognized it. Zayn Malik, watching from his office window, reflected quietly. That night had changed him as well. He realized arrogance and ego were dangerous, and humility and appreciation could transform not just a company, but a person's life. He sent Jonathan a message. "Your courage has taught me more than any executive meeting ever could. Thank you." Jonathan smiled. Some lessons, he thought, are earned only through experience, and sometimes through fire. Months later, Jonathan's life had transformed completely. He earned enough to secure Alina's medical care, invest in her education, and finally afford a life where worry did not dominate every moment. But more importantly, he had regained dignity, pride, and a sense of purpose that no amount of money could buy. The building that had once only seen him as a janitor now bore witness to his legacy. Every corner he cleaned, every server he saved, every life he protected was proof that courage and integrity could not be ignored. And in that moment, Jonathan Carter realized one truth. True heroism isn't recognized by titles or money. It's defined by the lives you save and the people you protect, silently, even when no one is watching. As he walked through the floors of Malik Global Headquarters, head held high, Alina calling him from home, and Zayn Malik's office door slightly ajar in respect, Jonathan felt the world had finally acknowledged him. Not the janitor, not the invisible man, but a true hero. And for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future without fear, because sometimes the smallest actions in the darkest hours create the brightest legacies.